Earlier this week, members of Congress and state officials all gathered in Albany to talk about the best way to implement high-speed rail. Now, this is a project that has been talked about for decades, but it actually may finally be a reality of sorts. The federal government has divided almost $9 billion worth of funding for several states, including New York. And now many people are hoping that these improvements can jumpstart a slow upstate economy, including my next guest. Dennis Mullen is the chairman of the Empire State Development Corporation, or ESDC for short, as it is known, and he joins us in the studio tonight.
Thank you very much.
How are you?
It's great to be here.
And welcome for your first time with me, of course, so thanks for coming by.
Great.
So high-speed rail, this summit brought together people from all over the industry. And as I mentioned, high-speed rail is something that has been really long talked about for years. But that wasn't necessarily the main focus of this particular get-together.
That is absolutely 100% correct. Our goal in bringing together industry leaders as well as our political leadership was to take advantage as a state of all the tremendous assets that we have in this state. In my old life in business, we called it maximization and utilization of the assets.
Wow.
We have a lot of companies here that have a lot of expertise throughout the state in high-speed rail,
right,
in the manufacturing of the cars, in the manufacturing of the chassis, in the manufacturing of the track, all the way down to precision manufacturing. So our goal was to bring this group of people, over 200 individuals attended, to help them understand how to go about it, where to go, where the dollars are going to be spent, not only in this state, but on a national basis.
So in other words, the point is, as we were saying, high-speed rail, I mean, look, I would love high-speed rail. I think a lot of people would. Buffalo, people would love to be able to get to New York City. It would open up to all sorts of more economic avenues, just from a job standpoint, right, in terms of accessing more highly paid jobs in the city or perhaps lower down in the corridor for people who live in Albany and points west and north. Right. The problem is that there have just been enormous obstacles to actually getting trains to run that fast because of the track and improvements that are necessary. What you're saying is the Obama administration has made high-speed rail a priority. Even if New York can't get high-speed rail tomorrow, we should still be able to benefit from an incentivization from the federal government.
Correct. When we look at the expenditures that are going to go out, we received $151 million in the state of New York. The state of California was over $2 billion. The state of Illinois was a little over $1 billion. So what we want to try to do is to work with the companies who have created jobs and who do this type of precision manufacturing, to have them be successful in California, so that those cars and all of the components are made here, solidifying the existing jobs and creating additional jobs as we as a country spend almost $9 billion. It's a new market. It's a new expenditure.
If you were to put a possibility, if you were going to gauge the likelihood that actually there would be high-speed rail right here in New York, what would you say the possibility is?
I think like a lot of things, right now I am encouraged by where we are spending our dollars. We are spending our dollars in preparation for a high-speed rail line. $151 million is dedicated towards 7 projects throughout primarily upstate, to be able to add track where there are bottlenecks in our existing system, to be able to upgrade our facilities, to be able to do that. So it's a long process. I understand that. I think coming from the private sector into the public sector, one thing that we do have to understand, we have to manage expectations. And I'm not so sure that the public sector manages expectations. We start talking about high-speed rail, and all of a sudden we believe that there might be a magic wand, and it'll be here overnight.
But we've been overnight, to be fair, we've been talking about it for years. I mean, we've been, Joe Bruno, the former majority leader, used to talk about this ad nauseum. He's been gone for some time now. Right. Now you've Malcolm Smith, the Senate president, has sort of picked up that baton and started running with it. But really, I mean, I've been in Albany for over a decade, and we've been talking about high-speed rail. And I think there are many people who are just like, okay, it's just never going to happen.
But I think there's a subtle difference at this particular point in time, and that difference is now there is appropriated funding. So I think that we have to hold on to that as a step forward. You know, when the original request went out for appropriations, you know, the states cumulatively, I believe there were a little over 40 states that put in requests for over $100 billion, and now we have $9 billion dedicated towards it. But so I don't disagree. that there's been a lot of talk about it, but this talk has now turned into some sort of action. But back to what my responsibility is in this state, serving Governor Patterson, and it's crystal clear: the maintenance of jobs and the creation of new jobs. We have a new market opportunity that expands across the entire country. We brought together the best and the brightest, and we have actionable items that we'll continue to communicate and try to make sure that we get our fair share for our manufacturing base in the state of New York.
Okay, speaking of jobs, actually, right now there is a jobs program that is being negotiated here in Albany. It's called the Empire Zones program. Actually, it's been controversial in terms of giving incentives to companies to stay here, but perhaps it hasn't been as effective as it might be. It's been very expensive, and some companies are actually not doing what they said they would do and creating jobs. So now there's negotiations to scrap the whole thing and replace it with something slightly more scaled down called the Excelsior program. You're involved in these negotiations. There's been a report that there's a deal. Is there a deal?
I think we're getting close. I think with what I know right now today as we're speaking, we're as close to a deal as we can possibly be. It has not been voted on. I've only been in Albany for a little less than 2 years, not the decade that you've been here, so I wanted to make sure that I'm clear. We are in conversations. I believe that both the Senate, the Assembly, and the executive branches are aligned in this particular area. But again, it hasn't been finalized.
What would be the main changes that you're negotiating at the moment from the Empire Zones program?
Well, from the Empire Zones program to the Excelsior program, I think if we look at programs, they run out of steam, and I know that there's a lot of pushback that the Excelsior program isn't as rich as the Empire Zone program. Right. But I think it's a bigger issue than that. I think what people are taking exception to is that the Excelsior program clearly has a return on investments for our taxpayers, and that is performance. And I think what we got away with from the Empire Zone program is that we didn't have the performance that we had expected, and it's been criticized for an extended period of time. But if I go back to my private sector life, as a CEO of a business, I needed to do certain things in order to be successful. And what the Excelsior program does is it incents CEOs to do things that are essential. I had to invest capital in order for us to be a low-cost producer, in order for us to bring a price-value relationship to products to our consumers. We are now incenting CEOs and business leaders to be able to do just that, and we are going to have an investment tax credit. I needed to do R&D to bring new products to the market, and we're incenting them to do that as well. If I did both of those things,
though, to make sure